Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory bolt action video. In today's episode, we have another intelligence report that is hot off the presses. Warlord Games has revealed how troop quality and morale is going to work in bolt action 3rd edition. But not only this, they have snuck into the article a possible massive nerf to the Soviet Union faction in the game. And so without further ado, let's not mess around any further. Let's fix bayonets and charge right into today's episode. Good news, everyone! Bolt Action 3rd edition is just around the corner. And the best way that you can prepare for this new and exciting edition of one of my favourite games of all time is by getting yourself some new bolt action miniatures. But where can you get these models? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. There's an affiliate link down in the description below that'll take you straight to the Warlord Games website, and you can get your World War II miniature fix right from the source. By using the affiliate link down in the description below, not only will you be getting some awesome models, but you will also be supporting the channel. A massive thank you to Warlord Games for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the action. So the first thing to mention that all of this information has been revealed by Warlord Games in their intelligence report series. We are going to be going through the article on the Warlord Games website, and we're going to be looking at the information that's been presented and adding our own thoughts and analysis to it. And just in case you're not sure where to find this intelligence report, I will make sure there's a link to the article down in the description below. But with all of that said, now let's get into this thing. And it starts off with Warlord saying that they have made some pretty significant changes here, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They quote in the article, while there are some pretty big changes, one of the guiding principles of 3rd edition is that if something worked and we couldn't think of a way to make it straight up better, leave it well alone. And all I can say to this is, thank God. I'm sure that we are all sick of rules that change for the sake of it, of new things being added in just because the designers of a game feel like they have to keep evolving and changing and redesigning everything every 3 years. I can't help but think that this is a little bit of a dig from Warlord Games, maybe towards games like Warhammer 40k, which do completely reinvent themselves and pretty much hard reset every 3 years or every edition. Moving on, the article gives a specific example of what has not changed. Inexperienced troops are wounded on a 3+ and have a morale of 8. Regulars are 4+ and have a morale of 9. And veterans are 5+ and a morale of 10. They continue by confirming that rolling to wound happens just the same as it did in the last edition, as do morale and order checks as well. So the classic 2d6 and try and roll under your leadership value. Personally, I think this is a great thing to see from Warlord, because I've never been in a game about action where I thought that my inexperienced guys should be wounded on like a 2 or should be harder to wound. I've never had an issue with the morale and the values that are in this part of the game. So it just always made sense, always felt very natural. And so not changing it up just makes sense and just works. I think the way this article has been presented is a very clever one. It's a very on the nose one. It shows that Warlord Games has got the finger on the pulse of the community and they're not just playing lip service. Because there have been a few criticisms online, there have been a few worries online about the changes that are coming in Bolt Action 3rd edition. And Warlord Games has put a lot of effort up until this point, hyping up the new and improved bits. But obviously, wargamers, we're a kind of breed that we don't like change. We like our comfy pair of slippers. We like to know what we know. We like that stability. And so Warlord Games started this article off by saying, look, we've been talking about everything that's changed. Let's put some stuff into perspective. This stuff hasn't changed. This core tenet of the game hasn't changed. Don't panic. Don't worry. Bolt Action is still at its core the game that you know and love, and it's going to play like a better version of that game. But having said all that, Warlord Games does confirm that there have been some pretty big changes to the way officers work and also the way that the rally order works. So rally is the order that you use when your infantry is heavily pinned up and you want to try and remove those pin markers so that they can in subsequent turns be effective. Because if your units are more active and have got lots of pins on them, they're going to be hitting not as good, they're not going to be taking orders as well. They're just generally just sat in the ground, just not wanting to move. Now, previously, how rally worked is you would roll your morale check, and then if you passed it, you would lose 1 pin marker for passing an order, and then an additional D6 pin marker. Essentially, you lost 1 plus D6 pins. How it works now is if you pass the rally test, you just lose all of your pins. What's interesting is in the article, Warlords say when a unit is ordered to rally, they take an order test without taking account into any pins, and if they pass, they immediately remove all pins. Now, removing all pins, that is new, that is great. I can't tell you the number of times I had a unit on 3 pins. I'd pass the rally check and I'd roll a 1, and next turn they'd still have a bloody pin on them. So just removing all of them just makes it feel cleaner, just makes it feel better, and just removes that negative game experience. What's interesting is everyone that I know that played the rally order in 2nd edition played it without taking the pins into account. So I don't know if this is just Warlord confirming something that we already knew, or if everyone that I know that's been playing about action for the last 12 years has been playing rally very, very wrong. But either way, it doesn't matter. Now, going into 3rd edition, you are going to be taking that morale check on a rally order without your pins, and you're going to be losing all of your pins. Overall, much cleaner, much quicker, much better, much more impactful. Small side note here, but I really, really like that they have this new rally order and that it gets rid of all of the pins, because it's much easier to be pinned up in 3rd edition. There are a lot less to hit modifiers. There's almost very few examples, very few cases when you're going to be hitting on a 6 followed by a 6 anymore. And as a result, it's much more likely that you're going to be picking up pins left, right, and center, and you're going to be picking these up early on in the game. So having an order that just gets you back into the fight quickly is very important, and I think it's a necessary change based on what else has been designed and baked into the game. Now, moving on, Warlord does confirm that if you get the number of pin markers equal to your morale value, then you will break and flee. So if you have a morale value of 8 and you get 8 pin markers, then your unit is basically destroyed. They go, screw this, I'm out, and they just break and flee. So if you've got regulars, if you get 9 pin markers, the same thing would happen. And if you've got veteran, then if you've got 10 pin markers, the same thing would happen. What's interesting is Warlord has confirmed a small, yet I think very important change, in that no matter how many bonuses or penalties apply, a unit cannot have a morale value of more than 11 or of less than 2. Now, in 2nd edition, it used to be you could not have a morale value of more than 10, which meant that no matter how veteran you were, no matter how many morale bonuses you were getting from officers being nearby, if you rolled a 5 and a 6 or a double 6 on an order check, you were always going to fail that. Now, the only time that you will fail an order check, guaranteed, no matter how many bonuses, is on that double 6. So there's a slightly higher ceiling, and that's going to make veteran troops obey orders just that little bit more. And again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, but I like this, and the reason I like this is because veterans have lost a little bit of potential durability, because you used to put veterans in some heavy cover and they would be almost impossible to dig out without high explosives. Now, your veterans in cover can be hit, they can be pinned up, and that means that there's potential for them to fail more morale checks if they're just on their base leadership 10. But if you've got veterans being led by an officer, then unless they're really, really pinned up, even if they've got a couple of pin markers on them, they're still going to be passing their order checks on anything but a double 6. So it just adds that little bit more effectiveness back into veterans and makes them still a very, very deadly and important unit. And that is how it should be. Veterans should be a very effective unit, and you should feel that quality, you should feel that difference in troop on the battlefield. And having an officer trying to rally and having an officer trying to coordinate a bunch of inexperienced guys as they cower in the dirt, people that maybe a week ago had never held a gun and they've just been forced into service, half of those guys, if not more, should just not do as they're told. They're like, I don't even want to be here. But the hardcore Eastern Front veterans who have seen it all before, who know the situation, who know that at this time when pins start coming in and when the fire starts coming in and shit starts getting real, those guys coming together and like their training kicking in, their experience kicking in, that should be visceral on the battlefield. And I think by increasing it to the point where, you know, in a lot of cases, veterans will be passing order checks on anything but a 666 is really going to represent that. And I think you're going to feel that surprisingly often in your games of bolt action. But speaking of morale bonuses, the most common way that you are going to get this is from your officers. And Warlord Games has revealed how the new officers are going to work. So previously, there were 4 levels of officer. You had first lieutenant, second lieutenant, you had captain, and major. Now, they have essentially consolidated these into 2 entries. You've got platoon commanders and you've got company commanders. Platoon commanders represent your first and second lieutenants, and company commanders represent your captains and majors. A platoon commander gives a morale bonus of +2 and can do 2 extra orders within a 6-inch bubble, and a company commander has a whopping morale bonus of +4 and can do 4 extra orders within 12 inches. Now, it is not explicitly stated in this article what the extra orders are, but I think it is safe to presume that this is the new way of doing snap to action like in second edition. Essentially, your officer can coordinate more units around them, and rather than you pulling a dice out of the bag and activating 1 unit, you can pull a dice out of the bag, activate your officer, and activate 2 other units around him at the same time. I don't think, it could mean this, but I don't think it'll mean this where an officer can give 1 unit 2 extra orders to affect them at the same time, so they could like run and then advance and go down, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's going to mean that. I think extra orders is just the new, slightly simpler way of writing the rule, you men snap to action. Now, on the one hand, I do really like the idea of just consolidating things and streamlining rules. A lot of the time, people were just taking second lieutenants as attacks in second edition. Now, with the fact that you are often going to have multiple officers running around, if you're taking multiple platoons, like a rifle platoon and like an armored platoon and an engineering platoon, you are going to have more officers running around. They're going to need to be more than just attacks. So having them be more impactful is good, and just making them simpler and more streamlined is good as well. Also, having a second lieutenant actually having impactful rules is good, because in the past, he would give like a +1 morale bonus, which was all right, but the extra order always felt like useless, because your second lieutenant could just activate 1 extra unit around him. But why wouldn't I just activate that unit? Because officers often don't do a lot of damage, right? So there was rarely a time when I would use Snap 2 with a second lieutenant. There was a few edge cases. There was rarely a time when I would use Snap 2 with a second lieutenant. Now, every time I want to do Snap 2, every time I want to do extra orders, whether second lieutenant or first lieutenant, whether it's just a platoon commander, it's actually going to do something, and it's not just going to feel like a waste of time. On the other hand, I am going to miss those quite hilarious moments, those quite funny moments when you have a second lieutenant leading your platoon and he just completely balls it up. His morale bonus doesn't matter. The men won't listen to him. The veterans won't listen to him because he's not given enough of morale bonus to them. I am going to miss that, because it was a good opportunity to make some, tongue-in-cheek jokes about second lieutenants and, officers reading maps upside down, all that kind of good stuff. So I am going to miss my Lieutenant Sobel, my Captain Sobel in my style officer in my army. But it's only a very, very minor thing. And, memeing aside, joking aside, it is a good choice. It is a good change. And I think it is going to make those officers which are going to be in your lists, whether you want them or not, they're going to be in your list. It is going to make you actually want them, and it's going to make them actually do something. Also, small side note, but I can't help but think this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, on-the-nose joke from Warlord Games to have a picture of the French army officers in the morale article. That's definitely going to be a bit of a joke towards the cheese-eating surrender monkeys. But moving swiftly on, we then have the spicy meatball, the really hot tamale, potential controversial shadow nerf to the Soviet Union. It's sort of hidden sneakily in the middle of the article. So it says, gone are the days of differentiating second and first lieutenants and now major and captains. We just have platoon and company commanders who provide bonuses you can see above. Essentially, junior and senior officers are now the upper level of the bracket for second edition, which makes them that just a bit more useful on the tabletop. In addition, they now have to pay for their weaponry. Gone are the days of free assault rifles for all German officer teams. Hooray! I mean, I never did it. I always took free SMGs because that's what everyone else could take. But it's good. You actually have to pay for your equipment now. And you are probably going to see officers running around with pistols. What ho, tally ho, all that kind of stuff with your Webley revolver. But also it means you're not going to have Germans getting a bunch of free extra shots. But here's the thing. So I like that. That's a little bit of a nerf to the Germans because they're not just getting the free assault rifles all the time. They can still pay for them. They're not getting them for free. But here's the big one. This is part of a wider philosophy of no free units across the whole of Bolt Action 3rd edition. F in the chat for the Soviet Union Free Conscript Squad. It's going to be gone. This article is making it very clear it's going to be gone. It's no longer going to be it. It's finito. It is gone. It is poof. It's gone to die by the Emperor's table. It's gone to the pearly gates. It has ceased to exist. It is no more. And I have to say, I do feel a bit sad about that. I really enjoyed the fact that you got that free unit of conscripts. And I have a lot of epic moments, epic tales from my free Soviet conscript squad just charging forward, taking down things they had no right to. And also, it often did feel when you were playing into the Soviet army that when they had that extra unit that they were just overwhelming you with just how many numbers they had. But I guess at the end of the day, it does make the game unbalanced. If someone is playing a game with 1,000 points and someone's essentially playing a game with 1,100 points, that's not fair. This is also potentially a big nerf to the Brits as well, because they will no longer get their free artillery observer. So Brits are going to have to pay for their artillery guy, and the Soviet Union are going to have to pay for their conscripts. I am very curious to see how Warlord Games replaces these rules, because when you're playing the Soviet Union, you really do want that you want that feeling of enemy at the gates, of throwing your waves of infantry forward. So I am curious about how they're going to replace that. And also I think that the Brit players really did love their free observer, and being able to upgrade that free observer to like a naval observer and getting some really big guns. Two very big changes, two fundamental changes to how two of the biggest and most popular factions in Bolt Action are going to play. We live in interesting times, that is for sure. Just a quick tangent as well. I can't help but feel like this article is definitely taking another opportunity. And I've noticed this in a few of the intelligence reports of Warlord Games, and I'm absolutely loving it. But I can't help but notice like this is another opportunity of Warlord to take a bit of a dig at Games Workshop. One of the defining things of Warhammer 40k in 10th edition, the latest edition of the game, is free units and free war gear. Multiple factions have ways of bringing units back from the dead, of replacing casualties in units, and all of the war gear is free now. You don't have to pay for your upgrades. Like if I'm going to give my tactical squad a heavy bolt and a plasma gun, no, that's just free. It's just baked into the unit's costs. So I can't help but think that by Warlord Games going completely the opposite way and mentioning this in the article, that they are kind of, planting their flag in the ground, and they're saying to a lot of potentially disenfranchised Warhammer players, people who aren't a fan of those changes. Because some people love it and some people hate it. But for those people that aren't a fan of the free war gear and of the returning units and stuff like that, Warlord Games is saying, hey, check out this. You want a game that plays like one that you're familiar with, plays like tabletop games of like yore, whilst at the same time being new and fresh and interesting? Come and check out ACHTUNG. So again, I think this article, I said at the beginning, I'll say it again, I think this article is very well written. I think it's very cleverly written, and I think it's definitely part of a good Warlord strategy to try and appeal to as many tabletop gamers as possible. And last, but certainly not least, we come to vehicles and morale. Now, a lot of stuff here is similar to 2nd edition. Vehicles can receive the same orders as infantry, except basically you can't get a down order. You can't do a down reaction. You essentially can't hit the dirt and try and get a cover save with a tank. Makes sense. How's a vehicle going to do that? Instead, tanks can be forced to go down as a result of vehicle damage or as a result of failing an order check. This is the same as in 2nd edition, and if you fail your order check, so let's say you've got some pins on you, you try to do an advance order and you fail it, what will happen is your vehicle will go down and it will actually reverse away from the fight. But there have been a couple of very small yet very impactful changes to how this works in 3rd edition, and you need to be aware of these or it could cost you. To quote from the article, a pinned vehicle is treated somewhat differently to a pinned artillery or infantry unit. A pinned vehicle must still take an order test to attempt an action, but if this is failed and if the vehicle has visible enemies to its front arc, it must make a reverse move if able to do so before going down. Note that this reverse move has to be straight backwards with no pivots allowed. This represents the vehicle reversing away from danger and then coming to a halt. If unable to move because it is immobilized, it just goes down. Furthermore, if there are no visible enemies to its front arc, then the vehicle goes down where it is. If a vehicle is unable to comply because there are any models or impassable terrain blocking its path, it can and indeed must maneuver to try and reverse, going around the intervening impassable terrain or models by the shortest available route. If a reversing vehicle reaches the table edge, then it retreats off the battlefield and is treated as destroyed. That last change there is huge. Previously, if you reached the edge of the battlefield, you would just stop. In fact, a lot of people would have their vehicles on the edge of the battlefield, and if they did reverse, they would just not move, and essentially they would have no real disadvantage to failing their order check apart from their vehicle just not activating that turn. This is a big change, and again, I think it is Warlord answering some of the potential cheese, some of the potential exploits that were being used in 2nd edition, and just locking that off and saying, look, if you want to have your vehicle safe at the back of the board doing some fire support, well, you better not take any pins, because if you do, you might find that vehicle off the board. Likewise, the fact that now you can't just reverse into a bit of impassable terrain and stay there, or backline your tank with some infantry to stop it from reversing from a down order, all of that's gone now. And what's interesting is I bet there's going to be scenarios where if you try and do that kind of stuff, now that your tank can start like maneuvering and like pivoting to get around stuff, you could find that a reversing tank, a retreating tank in its panic ends up massively exposing itself to enemy fire because of the route it's having to take to try and comply with that failed order test and to try and do that involuntary reverse backwards. So positioning of your tanks is going to be more important than ever, and trying to stop them from reversing is potentially going to cause you to have a very bad day. But that just about covers it. There's a lot of information in this article. In fact, it might be the most jam-packed one that we have had so far. A very, very deep intelligence report. And it's good that Warlord has confirmed some things that are staying the same. But I have to say there's a lot of changes here, and some of them are going to be hugely impactful to the game. Those officer bonuses are now going to be much more prevalent, and you're going to have a lot more officers in your army as well. Considering that officers might have 2 or 3 of them in your force, it's going to be interesting to see how their points end up working out, because if they are quite cheap because your force takes so many, you might find that you have lots of extra orders and lots of morale bonuses all over the place, or if they're quite expensive, it might end up limiting the number of extra platoons you want to take, and it would make sense them being a bit more expensive, especially if they've gained a lot more usefulness on the battlefield. Also, I think the changes to free war gear and free units going away is going to have a massive, massive impact. Probably the biggest impact of some of the stuff we've seen so far for specific factions. I think the entire Brit playstyle could change. I think the entire Soviet playstyle could change, depending on what Warlord Games has replaced this free stuff with. Lastly, I think the way that the vehicles have changed is going to be for the better, but I guarantee you, as someone who plays a bit of Old World and uses Wind Blast to push people's units off the board, I guarantee you someone is going to forget that and their tank is going to retreat off the board and they are going to be quite sad. But it'll only catch you out once and then you will remember it. At least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you a fan of these changes? What do you think of the new officers? And how do you think Warlord is going to adapt those factions which were getting free units to 3rd edition so they still feel powerful and they still feel familiar? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button. It really does help with feeding the YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously, guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.